Let me tell you how my mum sold my life out for less than the price of a taco. My name's Kendall, I'm 28, and for as long as I can remember, my mother, Yolanda, 53, has made everything about her. Every milestone, every tragedy, every Tuesday. But the 6th wedding? That was where I drew the line. You always made everything about you, Mom, I told her over the phone, the words tasting like ash. This time I'm out. The silence on her end was brief. Then came the calculated sigh. Fine, Kendall. If you're not going to support your own mother, then don't expect anything from me. I knew what she meant. The house my father built with his own hands, the one he left to her when he passed, the one I'd always thought would be my last tangible connection to him. It wasn't just bricks and mortar. It was his laugh echoing in the garage, the smell of his workshop, the quiet comfort of his study. 2 days later, the text came, not from her, but from my cousin Brinley, 30, a picture of a signed document. Guess who's the new homeowner, Kenny? Just closed the deal. $8. Family discount, you know? $8. My childhood, my father's legacy, sold for less than a coffee, just to spite me. Brinley, always the opportunist, always Yolanda's favourite niece, was already parading her new status. She'd always chased a shortcut to wealth, and now she thought she'd found it. My heart felt like a lead weight, dragging me down, but I forced a smile, a tight, brittle thing that didn't reach my eyes. Congratulations, Brinley, I texted back, adding a smiley face for good measure. Old houses have layers, some only I know about. Later that evening, after the initial shock wore off, I went to the dusty box I kept hidden in my apartment closet. It was my father's old toolbox, full of his forgotten treasures. I pushed aside a rusty wrench, a coil of fishing line, and a faded photograph of him grinning. Beneath it all, nestled in a velvet pouch, was a small, ornate, dust-covered key. I picked it up, its cold metal a stark contrast to the warmth of the memories it held. The house officially changed hands tomorrow. Good thing I was always a step ahead. The house officially changed hands the next day. Brinley wasted no time. Within a week, she was posting daily updates to her social media, each one a thinly veiled jab at me. New beginnings. So excited to make this my home. She'd caption photos of her moving boxes, always tagging Yolanda, who would inevitably comment with a string of heart emojis, and "so proud of you, sweetie." It was a performance, and I was the intended audience. The family dinner, a week after Brinley moved in, was a masterclass in passive aggression. Yolanda had decided to host it at her new fiancé's sprawling, impersonal house. I wasn't explicitly disinvited, but the message was clear. My absence was celebrated. My cousin Colby, 30, Brinley's brother, was there, mostly just moving furniture for Brinley, looking uncomfortable as usual. I heard about it from Aunt Reese, 55, my father's sister. She called me the next morning, her voice quiet, almost a whisper. "Kendall, honey, you missed quite the show. Yolanda and Brinley were practically doing a victory lap. They were talking about all the improvements Brinley's gonna make. Sounded like they're planning to tear down the garage." My stomach tightened. The garage? My father's workshop, his sanctuary. "Yes. Brinley wants a guest house." Reese paused. "Just be careful, sweetie. Brinley's always had a knack for finding trouble, and Yolanda's always had a knack for making it." A few days later, I found an excuse to visit the house. I texted Brinley, claiming I'd forgotten a box of old photo albums in the attic. She was surprisingly amenable, probably eager to show off her new domain. "Sure, Kenny, come on over. Colby can help you get the box down." I walked through the front door, the familiar scent of old wood and my father's pipe tobacco now overlaid with Brinley's cheap air fresheners. I made my way to the attic, Colby dutifully hauling down a dusty box I'd filled with junk from my apartment. But on my way out, I lingered. I found myself in the garage, running my hand over the workbench, the faint smell of sawdust still clinging to the air. I looked down at the concrete floor, a small smile playing on my lips. Brinley and Yolanda didn't know about the secret clause in my father's will. They didn't know about the trust, established by my grandmother Caroline, that could only be unlocked by a very specific set of circumstances. Only I knew, and my father's lawyer, Samantha Foster, 45. My father had always been a man of foresight, and he'd known exactly what kind of women his wife and niece were. He'd made sure that even if they sold the house for $8, the real prize wouldn't be theirs. A few weeks later, Brinley made her grand announcement. Not to me directly, of course, but to the entire family via a carefully curated Instagram post. A rendering of a sleek, modern guest house stood where my father's garage had always been. So excited to break ground on my new guest house. Out with the old, in with the new, she captioned it, again tagging Yolanda, who gushed about Brinley's vision in the comments. I feigned indifference, even offering a bland, "looks nice, cuz," in the comments section. Internally, I was doing a quiet victory dance. Brinley was doing exactly what I needed her to do, unwittingly playing right into my father's elaborate plan. The more she bragged, the more she committed to the demolition, the better. The plans for the demolition quickly escalated into an extravagant, groundbreaking party. Yolanda, naturally, took the reins, turning it into another one of her social spectacles. Invitations went out, RSVPs rolled in, and the online bragging reached fever pitch. Brinley was practically vibrating with self-importance, convinced she was on the cusp of some grand new chapter, completely oblivious to the layers beneath her feet. Amidst all the online noise, an envelope arrived in my mail. It was from Samantha Foster, my father's lawyer. Inside, a single sheet of paper, no formal letterhead, just a typewritten message. All we need is trust and good timing. It was our signal. The wheels were in motion. The demolition was scheduled for the following Saturday. The party was set for the same day, a double celebration of Brinley's supposed triumph. I knew I had one last thing to do. The night before the demolition, under the cover of darkness, I drove to the house. Brinley and Colby were out, probably at some pre-party celebration. The house was dark, quiet, almost mournful. I let myself in with the old spare key my father had given me years ago, a key I'd never returned. I walked straight to the garage, the small, ornate key from my father's toolbox clutched in my hand. The air was thick with the scent of old oil and dust, a bittersweet reminder of him. I knelt down, my fingers tracing the faint lines on the concrete floor, remembering the specific spot my father had shown me years ago, a secret just between us. I carefully lifted a loose floorboard, revealing a small, hidden compartment. Inside, I placed a small, sealed, waterproof container. It held something crucial, something that would tie everything together. I replaced the floorboard, brushed away the dust, and left, the key now feeling lighter in my hand. The stage was set. Demolition Day dawned bright and clear, a perfect backdrop for what Yolanda and Brinley envisioned as their triumphant spectacle. The backyard was teeming with people, a mix of family, Brinley's friends, and Yolanda's socialites, all dressed in varying degrees of casual chic. A catering tent was set up, a DJ was playing upbeat pop, and a small stage had been erected for the inevitable speeches. It was, as expected, a social media spectacle in the making. I arrived late, just as the first roar of the excavator filled the air, drawing all eyes to the garage. I spotted Remington Ward, 35, the demolition crew foreman, a burly man with kind eyes, directing his team. He caught my eye and gave a slight nod. I'd made a point of introducing myself to him a few days prior, feigning curiosity about the demolition process. As the excavator bit into the old garage wall, sending dust and debris flying, Remington walked over to me, wiping sweat from his brow. "Hey, Kendall," he said, leaning in slightly. "Glad you made it. Listen, I don't know if it's just me, but we've been having some weird foundation problems with this garage. It's different from the rest of the house. Almost like there's something underneath that wasn't part of the original blueprint." I kept my expression neutral, my heart doing a little flutter. "Really? That's odd," I murmured, feigning polite interest. "My dad built this place, you know. He was always particular about foundations." Remington nodded, looking back at the garage. "Yeah. Well, this is definitely particular. We're going to have to dig a bit deeper than usual to make sure everything's clear for the new build." Just then, a collective gasp went through the crowd, followed by shouts. The excavator had just ripped up a section of the concrete floor where the old workbench used to be. Beneath the shattered concrete, clearly visible, was a large sealed metal safe. The loose floorboard I'd lifted just nights before was now part of the debris, revealing the safe's solid top. It was old, grimy, and undeniably there. Panic and rumors rippled through the partygoers. Yolanda's carefully constructed facade of nonchalance crumbled instantly. Brinley, her face a mask of shock and then dawning greed, pushed through the crowd, practically tripping over herself to get to the site. "What is that?" she shrieked, pointing. "It's mine! It has to be! My legacy!" Remington, looking bewildered, carefully approached the safe with his crew. He pried open the heavy lid with a crowbar, revealing a stack of old documents, a single sealed envelope, and a small, waterproof container nestled among them. He pulled out the envelope first, turning it over in his hands. It was addressed in elegant, looping script. "To the only one who truly knows this house." The crowd was buzzing, 100 eyes fixed on Remington as he held the envelope. Yolanda, her face a mask of barely contained fury, pushed past Brinley. "Give me that! That's family property!" Remington, clearly out of his depth, looked at me, then back at the clamoring women. "Ma'am, I think we should probably get a lawyer involved for this." That was my cue. "Actually, Remington, my father's lawyer, Samantha Foster, is already on her way. I called her as soon as I heard about the discovery." I made sure to emphasize discovery, letting the implication hang in the air. Samantha arrived within the hour, her presence a calm, professional counterpoint to the escalating chaos. She took the envelope and the waterproof container from Remington, her expression unreadable. She motioned for me to join her and a few key family members, Yolanda, Brinley, and Aunt Reese, in the living room, away from the gawking crowd. Colby hovered awkwardly by the door. Samantha opened the sealed envelope. Inside was a formal letter, typewritten on aged paper, and an old family photo. My father, a young man, standing proudly with my grandmother Caroline. Samantha began to read, her voice clear and authoritative. The letter detailed a trust, established by my grandmother, tied to the property and its contents. The crucial part, the trust would pass to the person who found the safe, and could validate their claim with a secret code, known only to the intended beneficiary. Yolanda's face went from pale to blotchy red. "This is ridiculous! It's my house! My husband's safe! It's mine!" Brinley chimed in, equally indignant. "And I bought the house! It's mine by right!" Samantha held up a hand. "The will is very specific. The trust is activated by the discovery of this safe and its contents. And," she paused, looking directly at me, "the validation of a security prompt hidden within the safe itself." She then opened the small waterproof container I'd placed there. Inside was a single laminated card with a question. "What did you always call me when we were alone in the garage?" A hush fell over the room. Yolanda and Brinley looked utterly baffled. Aunt Reese watched me, a knowing look in her eyes. I met Samantha's gaze, a small, triumphant smile finally breaking through. "He called me Starlight." Samantha nodded, a faint smile touching her lips. "The code is correct. The trust is now yours, Kendall. Pending final legal validation, of course." Yolanda erupted. "You manipulative little— I'll sue! I'll sue you both!" Her threats, however, felt hollow against the weight of Samantha's calm pronouncement. The game had just changed. News of the family fortune spread faster than wildfire. It wasn't just family gossip anymore. It was a public spectacle, fueled by the demolition party attendees and Brinley's own social media posts. The narrative quickly shifted. Yolanda and Brinley, who had been basking in the glow of their supposed triumph, suddenly found their social circles recoiling. The whispers weren't about Brinley's new guest house anymore. They were about their greed, their pettiness, and the humiliating public unraveling of their plans. Yolanda, true to her word, launched into a formal lawsuit. Samantha, calm as ever, assured me it was a baseless attempt to intimidate. "She has no legal standing, Kendall. The will is ironclad, and your father's intent was meticulously documented." I steeled myself, refusing all contact from my mother. Years of emotional distance had prepared me for this. Her threats, once potent, now just sounded like a desperate child's tantrum. Brinley, meanwhile, was in a different kind of freefall. Her ownership of the house, once a source of pride, quickly became a legal trap. She had taken out a substantial loan to fund the guest house demolition and construction, confident in her new asset. Now, with the trust and the massive fortune it represented firmly out of her grasp, she was saddled with debts and no inheritance. The bank wasn't interested in her family discount. She lashed out at everyone, particularly Yolanda, blaming her for encouraging the purchase and the grand plans. Their alliance, built on shared avarice, was crumbling spectacularly. A few weeks later, Samantha called me. "The validation is complete, Kendall. The trust is officially yours. We can proceed with the transfer of funds whenever you're ready." My hand trembled slightly as I signed the closing documents in Samantha's office. It wasn't just money. It was vindication. It was my father's quiet strength, his foresight, finally coming to fruition. As I walked out of her office, a notification popped up on my phone. It was from a local real estate site, a listing for the house, Brinley's house. "Foreclosure sale," the headline read. I watched, detached, as Yolanda and Brinley's public humiliation played out online, a digital echo of their real-world collapse. The house, the symbol of their greed, was now a monument to their folly. The cash windfall from the trust hit my account, a quiet, almost anticlimactic affirmation of my father's foresight. It was a substantial amount, far more than I'd ever expected. With Samantha's guidance, I watched the foreclosure proceedings on the house unfold. Brinley and Yolanda, desperate to avoid total financial ruin, were forced to sell the house quickly, at a significant loss. The market wasn't kind to a half-demolished garage and a cloud of legal uncertainty. I instructed Samantha to contact their real estate agent. Samantha structured the deal. In exchange for me assuming Brinley's remaining mortgage debt and covering the associated legal fees, the deed was transferred for a symbolic $1. It was the only way for Brinley and Yolanda to avoid complete financial ruin from the foreclosure, cutting their losses by letting me take on the problem. The agent, probably just eager to close the messy deal, accepted on their behalf. The house, the one sold for $8 out of spite, was now legally mine for $1, plus the burden of Brinley's debt. The confrontation was inevitable. I didn't seek it out, but Yolanda and Brinley, having nowhere else to turn, showed up at my apartment building, their faces contorted with rage and desperation. Colby was with them, looking utterly miserable, clearly dragged along. "You snake!" Yolanda shrieked, her voice echoing in the sterile hallway. "You stole everything! How could you do this to your own mother?" Brinley, tears streaming down her face, added, "And after I bought it, it was mine. You ruined my life." I stood in my doorway, calm and cold, years of emotional armor holding firm. "You sold it, Mum, for $8. Brinley bought it, then couldn't afford it. I simply picked up the pieces and the debt you left behind." I looked at Brinley. "You were so busy chasing a shortcut to wealth, you didn't bother to look beneath the surface, did you?" Yolanda lunged forward, but Colby, for once, stepped in front of her, holding her back. "Kendall, please," he mumbled, clearly uncomfortable. "There's nothing to discuss," I said, my voice steady. "The house is legally mine. You have until Tuesday to pack up anything that was actually yours, not my father's, and be out. The agent will be in touch with the details." Their faces were a mixture of disbelief and utter defeat. I watched them, their grand plans shattered, their greed exposed. It wasn't just about the money. It was about reclaiming what was rightfully my father's legacy, and in doing so, finally severing the toxic cord that had bound me to my mother for so long. A few days later, on Tuesday, I walked through the emptied living room of the house. The air was still, carrying faint ghosts of my father's presence, now free of Brinley's cheap air fresheners and Yolanda's manipulative energy. On the mantelpiece, forgotten in their hasty departure, was a single, embossed wedding invitation. Yolanda's 6th wedding. I picked it up, glanced at the elegant script, and tossed it into the empty fireplace. Then I closed the door, sealing off that chapter of my life. The house was quiet, a different kind of quiet now. It wasn't the heavy silence of grief, nor the agitated buzz of Brinley and Yolanda's presence. It was a peaceful quiet, a space finally reclaimed. Walking through the rooms, I felt a lightness I hadn't realized I was missing. The last emotional hold my mother had over me, the one tied to this house, to my father's memory, was finally severed. The threads of manipulation and obligation were cut clean. Public sympathy for the whole debacle was, predictably, mixed. Some people, mostly those who knew Yolanda's reputation, saw it as a justified comeuppance. Others, particularly those who only saw the headlines of a daughter taking her mother's house for $1, viewed me as ruthless, cold. I didn't care. Their opinions were just noise. I knew the truth of the layers, the years of quiet abuse, the constant emotional blackmail. This wasn't just about money or property. It was about finally being free. A few days after I took possession, Aunt Reese called. Her voice was soft, hesitant. "Kendall, I just wanted to say, your father would be proud. He always knew you were the smart one." It was a quiet olive branch, extended without judgment or expectation. I considered it. Reese had always been an observer, never fully siding with Yolanda, but never actively intervening either. Perhaps, now that the dust had settled, there was space for something new. I still had the mortgage debt to deal with, but with the trust, it was a manageable detail, not a burden. The garage, a gaping wound in the side of the house, would be rebuilt, but not as a guest house. Maybe a proper workshop, a place where I could tinker, just like my dad. Revenge had built my fortress, a solid wall against the emotional assaults of my past. But karma, in its own unpredictable way, had finished the moat, creating a clear, uncrossable boundary. I sat down in my father's old armchair in the living room, the one piece of furniture I'd insisted on keeping. The afternoon sun streamed through the window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. I owned everything now: the trust, the house, the freedom from my mother's toxic grip. I had won, but as I leaned back, a strange, quiet emptiness settled over me. I wondered what, if anything,